Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman for his questions. I'm also grateful for him asking me how do I reconcile the progress of my career. It's a question my wife asks me every night, and I'm grateful to him for repeating it. But I have enormous respect and affection for the honourable gentleman. We both represent constituencies that voted to leave, and both of us are also impatient to see us leave the European Union. When a Brexit delay was suggested in January 2019, the honourable gentleman said, "It sounds once more like the British establishment is doing what it always does, which is ignoring the views of millions of ordinary folk, and that is something I am not prepared to tolerate." Comrade, neither am I, which is why we have to leave on October the 31st. Now, the honourable gentleman also said that civil servants are doing a fantastic job in preparation, and I join him in paying tribute to the work that civil servants are doing. He asked about medical shortages. Medical shortages can sometimes sadly occur whether we're in or out of the European Union, as we've seen recently with the HRT shortage, which my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, is doing so much to help to counter. But it is a shared issue for all of us. 2/3 of the medical supplies which reach the Republic of Ireland pass through the narrow straits. That is why it is so important that we secure a deal, not just in order to safeguard our superb NHS, but also to help those citizens in Ireland who are our brothers and sisters too. It is also the case that the honourable gentleman asked us about the EU settled status scheme. He made the point that 1 million people have received status so far and asked about progress. Every day 15,000 more people are applying. The settled status scheme is working, and he is absolutely right. Now is the time for our European partners to extend the same generosity to UK citizens as we are extending to EU citizens. He also talks about the money being spent. At the beginning of his questions, he said £6.3 billion was too little, too late, and then subsequently, at the end of his statement, he said, how can we justify such expenditure? The fastest U-turn, I think, in history in the course of just 6 minutes. He also talked about our contemplation of a cynical general election. But I thought it was the policy of the opposition, certainly the Leader of the Opposition, to welcome a general election at the earliest possible opportunity. I see the Leader of the Opposition seeking guidance on this question from the Speaker. I leave the House to decide.
Order. I know the Minister won't want to mislead the House. The right honourable gentleman was simply alerting me to his experience of visiting Romania, which is somewhat tangential to, indeed entirely divorced from, the ruminations and the product of the Secretary of State's or the Minister of the Cabinet Office lucubrations, which we don't need. Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And we all know how much the Leader of the Opposition enjoyed seeing Celtic play in Romania. But the other point that the right honourable gentleman asked me about was the extent of our negotiations, and they are extensive. It has been the case that the Prime Minister, my right honourable friend, the Exit Secretary, and his Sherpa have been visiting every single European capital in order to make sure that we can advance our negotiations. But one thing is critical. If we are to succeed in these negotiations, we need to get behind the Prime Minister. And if it is the case that the motion before the House is passed tonight and the legislation which it gives effect to is passed tomorrow, then we will allow the European Union to dictate the length of any extension and to put any conditions they wish to on that extension. That would totally undermine the government's capacity to negotiate in the national interest. It has been said in the past of some that they sent out the captain to the wicket and broke his bat beforehand. Well, it is the case that Labour's approach to negotiations is not just breaking the bat, it is blowing up the whole pavilion. But it is no surprise that Labour want to sabotage our negotiations because they also want to sabotage their own negotiations. Labour's policy on negotiation is to have an infinitely long extension, to negotiate a new deal with Europe, to bring it back to this country, and then to argue that people should vote against that deal and vote to remain. How can we possibly have confidence in the Leader of the Opposition to negotiate in Europe when his own party don't have confidence in him to secure a good deal for the British people?